So, what's our most fundamental duty to people who can't speak for themselves? It's a question that gets right to the heart of what it means to be a truly compassionate society. Today, we're going to break down a pretty powerful ethical argument all about guardianship, consent, and our shared responsibility to the vulnerable. It's a heavy topic for sure, but it's one that has some huge implications for every single one of us. The source material we're digging into today opens with this exact statement. Just let that sink in for a second. This is really the core idea that's going to guide us through this whole thing. The idea that you can't judge a society by its power or its money, but by how it treats its most vulnerable people. That's our starting block.
All right, so how do we take that huge foundational idea and apply it to the real world? Well, here's our roadmap. We're going to start by exploring what that societal duty really looks like. Then we'll dive headfirst into the very tricky concept of consent. From there, we'll walk that fine line between affirmation and exploitation. We'll also look at the legal role of a guardian before we unpack the source's big conclusion that our job is to protect, not to project.
Okay, first up, society's foundational duty. The source doesn't really frame this as a bunch of rules, but more like a core principle, a principle of stewardship for those who can't easily fight for themselves. And right here, the source makes a really critical distinction. It says that true protection isn't about control at all. It's about stewardship. It's about a deep commitment to treating every single person with dignity, with patience, and with truth. So, from this point of view, moral guidance isn't an act of oppression, it's actually an act of care. Okay, so let's build on that and move to our next section, which is all about the super critical idea of consent. And the source argues that we've got to look way beyond a simple yes or no. I mean, this is the million-dollar question, right? What is true consent? The source suggests that our everyday understanding of just saying yes might be way too simple, especially when we're talking about folks with cognitive limitations or people who are dependent on others. And here is the answer that the text lays out. According to this argument, real consent is an intellectual act. It's not just about giving permission. It's permission that's backed by, number one, full awareness of what's happening. Number two, a deep understanding of the long-term consequences. And number three, a clear, independent intention. Without all three of those, the source says, it's not really consent. And you can see the stakes here are incredibly high. The source argues that if we ignore someone's cognitive limits, their inability to meet those three conditions we just talked about, we aren't empowering them at all. What we're actually doing is leaving them completely defenseless against manipulation or, and this is a specific phrase from the source, ideological grooming. So, this brings us to the most intense part of this whole argument, where the source draws a really sharp line between what it considers genuine guidance and what could be manipulation. So when does making someone feel good about themselves cross a line into something, well, something much darker? The source argues that even the best-intentioned affirmation can actually become a form of exploitation if the person receiving it can't truly consent to the ideas being affirmed. To really dig into this, the source introduces a very specific and powerful term, coaching. Now, in this context, we're not talking about sports. Coaching is defined here as the act of supplying someone with an identity from the outside, giving them the concepts, the words, and even the moral reasons for it. This slide really just lays it all out. On one side, you've got what the source calls coaching, an identity that's given to you, almost like a script. On the other side, you have genuine self-expression, an identity that comes from within, that's based on personal conviction and, there's that phrase again, informed consent. The huge difference is whether the identity is something the person themselves could come up with and defend on their own. All right, so let's take this whole ethical framework and see how it connects to the real-world legal and moral duties of a guardian. So how does our legal system handle situations like this? Well, it has a process called guardianship. When someone can't make their own major life decisions, a guardian is appointed to be a steward of their best interest. And notice that key word, connecting all the way back to our first point, steward, not owner. And yeah, that role of steward comes with some very serious responsibilities. A guardian's number one job is to act in the best interests of the person they're protecting, period. That means they have to set aside their own personal beliefs, their own ideology, their own convenience, and focus only on what's best for their ward. And this isn't just about practical stuff. According to the source, this duty extends to the deeply personal and complex issue of identity itself. This quote from the source really just drives the point home.
It argues that if a guardian affirms an identity that their ward can't fully understand or consent to, they are directly violating their legal and moral duty. It frames this not as an act of kindness, but as a massive breach of trust, basically replacing the ward's informed will with the guardian's own beliefs.
And that leads us to the final big picture principle that the source presents as the absolute fundamental rule of guardianship and care. This slide lays out that final, crucial distinction. On one side, you have protection, which means providing safety, education, and compassion, but also restraint. It's about putting the vulnerable person first. On the other side, you have projection, which is imposing your own adult ideologies onto someone who depends on you and can't push back. The source argues these two things are worlds apart.
And so we get to the source's ultimate conclusion. When the desire to affirm a choice clashes with the duty to protect a vulnerable person who can't give informed consent, the duty to protect has to win every single time. According to this argument, there are no exceptions.
And we end on this final, really powerful summary from the source. It boils down the entire argument into one memorable mandate. It's a call for a kind of stewardship that puts safety and guidance above all else, leaving us with a very clear, if challenging, perspective on what it means to fulfill society's most sacred duty.